I have a few, but I'll start with this one because it was the most dangerous. One night, my boyfriend and I were out drinking and hanging out with our friends and went back to our other friend's apartment that lived about 10 to 15 minutes away from us in the next town over. It was getting pretty late and we both had work the next day, so we called an Uber to pick us up. So, our Uber gets there and everything is fine. We make casual small talk as you usually do in Ubers or Lyfts. The vibe was fine and the dude seemed nice enough, nothing to worry about. I was just exhausted and wanted to go home. Then, I remember feeling like wide awake out of nowhere. We get to the end of a street and I don't recognize it as being close-ish to our homes. And while I'm really bad at directions, this was a turn where it was like you turn right and you're going towards our homes, but you turn left and you're clearly driving in the complete opposite direction. The guy gets to the stoplight and flicks his left blinker on. I immediately start looking around and look to my boyfriend, who's clearly on edge. My boyfriend asks the driver where he's going because this is clearly the wrong way, and he tells my boyfriend not to worry, that he's from the area and he knows a shortcut. Whatever, we both relax a little bit, especially because this was a main road and there were plenty of side streets around that he could have been cutting through. Then he gets to another stoplight and has the ability to either make a right, which would put him going towards the general direction of where we lived, or a left, which was going in the direction of the next town over. He flicks his left blinker on again, and at this point, I noticed that he has the Uber app and GPS tracking totally off. His entire phone is off. So there's nothing tracking his driving or location, and he's not being monitored by the app. My heart starts beating, and I get out my phone to call 911 and my car keys because I have this shiv-like stabby weapon thing as a keychain. My boyfriend flies out of his seat and lunges towards the front seat, so he's like half standing up and starts yelling, asking the guy where the fuck he's going, because we know that he's going the wrong way. The guy immediately flicks his right blinker on instead and skirts into the right lane instead of the left, where it had previously been. He says sorry over and over again, and my boyfriend says, "You know what? Never mind. We're gonna get out right here. This is fine. Please unlock the doors." When he went to unlock the doors, the driver freaked out, got really defensive and on edge, and was like, "No, I'm sorry. I promise I'll take you home now. I'm going the right way now. I'm so sorry, buddy. I got you." Almost admitting that he was clearly taking us in the totally wrong direction. I can't remember if we just rode the rest of the way in that Uber because there were likely no other ones around at that hour, and we felt like we called the guy out enough that he wouldn't do anything, or if we actually got out of the car and just began to walk home. Like I said, very exhausting drunk night. The most chilling parts about this for me was how he had his app off and how he was so quick to correct himself as soon as we noticed. Like, he didn't even try to come up with a cover story to justify his actions. He admitted that before my boyfriend freaked out on him, he was not taking us to our direction. We reported that guy the next day on the Uber app and have never come in contact with him since. I don't know what he was planning, but I pray to whoever is up there that he didn't have the opportunity to scare anyone else like this ever again. So, Sketchy Uber driver, who was very bad at lying, let's never meet again.
End of Street Man by u/ZRW237. Okay, so for a little geographic context, the street that I live on was built on an uneven hill, making the two roads it consists of having a 1 to 2 meters difference in height and 2 meters between them. The bottom street is around 12 meters long and the top is around 10. Now, the one and only road connecting this street was at the bottom road. It connects to two much larger streets, and the first street, Street A, was rather even, around 15 to 20 meters in length, and the other street, Street B, that leads to the town center, is also 15 to 20 meters in length, but is incredibly steep, so going up this hill is a challenge if you're not in a car. Now, to begin, I was just having a nice stroll down Street A when I saw him, the man at the end of the street. The street was just barely curved, and he was hidden by the houses until I got close to him. He was wearing thin jeans, a blue shirt, and a winter jacket. Mind you, this is in the midst of summer. The first thing I noticed about this man was his build. I couldn't tell you what he looked like above his hips, but his legs were very odd. They had bumps and divots here and there and were completely asymmetrical. I assumed he could have had an injury and kept on my walk, but then he started moving. He began moving from his spot, incredibly slow. In the corner of my eye, I didn't notice it, but when I looked at him, I could see him raising his foot and pushing it down, just barely in front of him. Like he had just learned how to walk or something. And I was getting a bit creeped out at this point, considering I don't like coming across people on my walks anyway, so I got the hell out of there. As I was walking down Street A to head back to the bottom road, I heard shuffling. Like gravel behind me, being stopped on rocks and being kicked all over the place. I turned around and saw the man following me. I noticed this because he had very pronounced brown hair, and I saw it through the bushes. I was getting genuinely scared, even though I knew he was just some tired dude getting home. Even so, I went all the way down to the bottom street to maybe ward him off just in case he was following me so I could get back to my house on the top street. Once I got out of view of him, I started running. I tried to convince myself I was doing this just for the exercise, but I'd seen too many horror movies and I'm not dealing with this Jason Voorhees bullshit. Once I got back up to the top street at my house's front lawn, I stopped a bit because I was heavily out of breath, because I'm very out of shape. I sat down on the little path that I had taken to get back to my street. I saw him. I don't think he noticed me, but I could see his hair, and I was fucking horrified now. There was no way in hell he needed to get to his house if he had followed my exact path. Especially because I chose it because I expected him to take the shorter path to get up there. But he was following my every movement. Know that I had only been there for a few seconds, so unless my guy said /teleport me at this kid, then he was running. And I mean like running. I fucking ran up my front yard to get to my house and hesitated. I thought, maybe he's looking for his house, or maybe his friend's house and is finding it by looking at the number. So I stopped a bit and hid myself behind my neighbor's trees to look at him. This is the part that genuinely scared me. He stopped right at the end of the street, looked around, and started running again. Now, not to sound really exaggerated, but he was fucking running so inconceivably fast it was scary. He was practically at my house by the time I had gotten inside. I don't think he heard me open my door, but if he had, I would be absolutely fucked. Afterwards, I looked out the little window next to my door, and I saw him stop at my house, turn and look. I was so scared out of my mind at this point, but he just turned and slowly crept away again. Every now and then I would see him just standing somewhere. Sometimes at someone's lawn, sometimes just in the street. Other times he would be running dangerously fast and then stop as if he had no momentum at all. But I did, at one point, have a nightmare about him. It wasn't really eventful and wasn't scary when I was actually in the dream, but I woke up in a cold sweat afterwards for no reason. The dream went that I just woke up one day and looked out my living room window to find him standing in my backyard looking at me. Doing absolutely nothing. Then he looked me dead in the eyes, and just as slow as he walked, he began to grin. It was so freakishly realistic that I just want to know who the hell this guy was and what he wanted. Or maybe I don't.
I was 11 years old and had plans to meet my two friends, sisters D and B, at the JCC to go swimming. I regularly walked there since it wasn't that far. So I set off to the J, that's what most people call it, with my gym bag. I was wearing shorts and a tank top if I remember correctly. And I crossed over Church Street and was walking on the right side of the street. I got to this long empty building and noticed a dark car with all tinted windows sitting way in the back of the lot. I almost would have walked right past because he was so hidden. He yelled out to me. I felt uneasy immediately because my parents were very strict about stranger danger. I said, "Hey." His driver's seat door was open. He asked me to come closer because he wanted to take my picture. And I did, by about 3 feet since he was still so far back. I was stupid, because he definitely could have driven up and pulled me in. He asked if I modeled before and I said yes. He then asked if he could take closer pictures. I'd have to come closer though. I freaked out. I said I was meeting my friends at the JCC, and no matter, he kept begging me to come closer. I was terrified. Suddenly, I noticed a woman watering her lawn. I said she was my mom and that I had to go. I can't even remember if he asked my name. I sprinted home checking behind me every once in a while, and as soon as I got home, I started subbing it all came out. My mom took me to the police station, and to my shock, my friends D and B were there. He'd just taken pictures of them. D thought it was funny, but B didn't. It was my fault he did that. The pedophile knew they were there because I told him. Apparently, he approached another girl near Octon Pool. He took her picture. We did a composite. He had salt and pepper red hair and a short beard, but he was never caught. I know he fully intended to take me. My interaction with him was very different from the others. So watch out for things that don't seem right. You'd think a pedophile would have been caught. Not so. Be careful, especially around adults that seem too interested in you or are acting inappropriate.
Weird Man with Weird Intentions by U/S Searson. My English is not perfect, so excuse me if this reads weird. A year ago, I started working as an Uber. I worked mostly at nights, so I had a few weird encounters on my time as a driver. But one time was particularly weird. Every day I started working, at 8 p.m. and finished at maybe 3 to 4 a.m. One day, I was working near the suburbs of my city, and it was 2 a.m. and I got a request for a passenger a few kilometers away from me. I took the route and it took me to this isolated part of the suburbs area. Usually this late at night, there's no one on the streets, of course, but this area was, well, it seemed completely desolated. All the houses were dark, not even lights on the patio or anything. No cars on the street, it felt so creepy. I didn't know the area before, so I was already feeling uncomfortable. Also, I live in the north part of Mexico, so things are usually not that safe here. Anyways, I drove to the location of this dude and he was standing on the corner of the street near a light pole. I parked the car and he opened the door and got in. The dude had an oversized dark jacket. He was sweaty, he smelled weird, and he was, scared. He looked to the back seat and then to the sides of the car, and as if he was checking for something. I thought it was weird, but, well, I didn't mind. Then I proceeded to start the trip, and the app shows me the route. The location I was supposed to drop him was in Mexico City, which was 900 kilometers from my city. So I asked, "What is this?" The dude told me he pressed a random location to drop him on and that he lived nearby, just a few blocks from here. His phone was dead supposedly and he was going to pay in cash. I don't even know if this is an option in the US, but you can pay with cash on here. He didn't look at me at all, not even once. He seemed scared for some reason as he was breathing fast and loud, but trying to hide it. I started the car and the dude was pointing at me where to go next. After a few blocks, I realized we were just going in circles. So I asked him what was the deal. He told me that his girlfriend left him earlier and he suspected she was with a dude nearby. I told him this wasn't my job and to get out of my car, and he yelled at me to shut up. At this point, I started getting scared. It was so late at night and in a very lonely area. The dude was acting very weird, and I just started thinking that he might even have a gun or knife under the jacket or something. He wouldn't get out of the car when I told him, so I just kept going. On the street, there was a person walking by. He was holding some grocery store bags, and my passenger told me to stop the car. I did it, and he told me to follow the guy. Obviously, the dude noticed we were following him, so this person started walking faster and went inside a house. I suppose his house. Next thing, this weirdo just tells me to stop there in front of the house, and we just stayed there on complete silence for 5 minutes. He was just staring at the windshield, not even the house, and was just in silence, breathing hard. I was so scared, I didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the dude opens the door and tells me not to leave. And of course, I was planning to leave at this point. Before he exits the car, he turns around and yells at me, "Don't leave." As soon as he steps out, I close the door and leave as fast as I can. I was shaking. I suffer very bad panic attacks. I called the cops and told them what happened and went straight home. I don't know what was wrong with that dude, but I felt like he was planning something bad against that random guy. Anyways, I just figured I'd share this creepy experience here.
Several years ago, I suffered a small stroke which I was lucky enough to walk away from at only the cost of many of my long-term memories. It fragmented that part of my meat hard drive to the point that I had to relearn much of my teenage and early adult life from photos and exposing myself to those people and places again. Sometimes, my memories are spans of imagination to bridge the gaps. I remember my family in patches up to my teenage years and not much between my second year of high school and my mid-20s, with gradually more detail as I reached my 30s up to my 40s where I have no problems. Sometimes, it feels like I never saw the first few seasons of a television show in which that I'm the star. People just pop in, like they were always there. It is often frustrating, and it doesn't help that my experience makes me more prone to spikes of anger. I don't live where I live those dead patches of my life, so there are literally hundreds of people from that time who exist as either ghost, abstract feelings, or not at all. I visit the hometown every so often to put flowers on my parents' graves and try to remember when and how they died. I keep in touch with my estranged sister, whose memories of family are tainted by her bad experiences and resentment towards her parents. My only window into that world is through my younger sister, who I wouldn't keep up with if not for our shared family. She lives in my old hometown, and our age difference is such that we knew many of the same people. Most of those people have moved away, but some planted roots less than a mile from where they grew up. For some reason, those are the people that I know best through talking to them, even though they probably played little or no role in my real life. People will approach me every so often there and in my own adopted city, and I'll never have no idea who they are. People sometimes get mad at me for insulting them that way. I've had ex-girlfriends slap me and close buds walk off angry because they don't understand my situation. Some think it's a joke. Sometimes it is sad, but other times it can be downright scary. I was sitting in a pizza joint in the business district of Trenton, Delphia, working on something among the lunchtime crowd, when someone sat down in the empty chair opposite of me. I looked up from my work and automatically began the process of threat assessment and identification. For me, it has become a practice. Usually, it's someone I know and I'll act like most people. If I don't immediately recognize the face, but they seem to know me, I will try to index them in my patchwork brain somehow. This was someone I didn't know, but might have seen many times. Older, 50s, male and stonky, grinning with confidence and leaning on his elbows, leaning forward, indicating acquaintance with me. The eyes are familiar. My index traces that to a feeling of unease. He's not an ugly person, but his gaze is severe. He wears a suit here like it's a costume because his posture isn't good for the cut of the blazer. And that smile is not entirely pleasant, except that he's trying to make it seem so. This process took me about 3 seconds, which is just long enough to seem like an awkward pause because he says nothing at first. He just waits for what I guess is an automatic reaction. Now, I'm in pre-COVID crowd, pressed in close enough to smell the entire menu and overhear a dozen life stories and woes, if I had the want to do so. So I'm not feeling threatened, but uneasy. After a few more seconds, I actively stop blinking to see how long it will be before we start this conversation. He breaks and goes first. "You don't recognize me, do you, Jimmy?" His smile broadens, and I can't help but admire an expensive rack of teeth that I think might be appropriate inside the head of a mule. The skin over his forehead wrinkles, carrying 2 plucked but pulp eyebrows along the slope. This helps me because nicknames are great context clues. My parents called me James, my colleagues and current friends call me Jim, my sister calls me Jimbo Dumbo because she's an asshole. Also, only people from back home in that gray zone of time called me Jimmy. My subprocessor brain keeps working. My face neutral, I replied with the usual, "Oh, sorry, no, I have a bad memory for faces." That fucking smile is trying to split his lips off his face. His eyes narrow to a severe degree and they glisten with tears pressing out between the lids. He blushes hard, like I'd slapped him. It's honestly creepy but proves my abstract memory of this clown is accurate. I didn't fucking think so, Jimmy. This is you now, huh? Not sure what to say to that. He's starting to hold himself together, putting pressure on his elbows and bringing himself across the center of the table with his bullet-top crazy person face nearing the edge of my laptop screen. That flimsy barrier gives me a little comfort, but not much. This is me now? I'm in a suit, minus the jacket that I left in my car. I'm 30 years, 50 pounds, and a lifetime of experiences beyond whatever the hell he's thinking of as then. But seeing how he's wearing a suit that he probably digs out only for job interviews, weddings, and court appearances, looking like he's either seething or suffering from impacted bowel, I could easily dismiss the air of contempt in his statement. I am me, as I always was, I guess. This was the best that I could do, while the brain needs work to give me something to work with. He says, "I didn't think I'd ever run into you again, Jimmy. I bet you hoped I never would." Fucker, I thought. I just told you I didn't recognize you. Practice this in a mirror, did you? His face is not in my nightmare directory. He is not one of those dozens of images that I only see in those lucid dreams that mix fantasy with suppressed or fractured memories. Usually, about bad people or events, a breakup, losing my parents, a couple of bad beatings that I suffered in school from students at the local clown college. But this wasn't anyone there. "I heard you got sick. Did you have a breakdown or something?" I said what I was thinking. Clearly you're not an old friend, so what do you want? Instead of splitting off his skull like a hot kernel of corn, his face suddenly went slack. His cheeks fell and his brow unraveled. The eyes, still narrow, softened to consider my response. "I can't even tell if you're fucking with me," he said in a low grumble. He sat back and planted his palms on the table, eyes scanning the dusty rafters of the pizza place and whatever the hell he was on about. It was the way his right pinky bent against the tabletop that unlocked something in my head. It was bent at an odd angle. The ring finger was weird too. They had been broken a long time ago and not properly set. It was that, and the phantom pain in my cheek and neck that connected the threads in my head, but not enough to give me a name or place or a time. I just knew he was dangerous. When I get into those rare situations, I have to stave off a panic attack. It's a lot like arriving at work to suddenly remember you have a big presentation to give, or that dream where you're in finals week but you never attended class. "You smug, selfish asshole," he growled. His fingertips pressed down on the checkerboard tablecloth. "If I saw you anywhere else, on the street, in an alley, back home maybe, behind the school, I would end you." The last part drew with it some ancient hatred that broke past the practiced facade that he perfected in front of a mirror for probably many years. There was something evil but honest on his face, reflecting a truth in his heart about me. In front of me was a mystery from inside the dead space of my past. My face burned and I held my hands behind my monitor when they started to tremble. Something about this guy's face displayed all the bad men in my life that I'd forgotten, all the hidden dangers among the enemies that I may have made and forgotten. It's like I'd slip on a skin suit of some kid who died at 23, and while that kid may have met this guy, and clearly not hit off with him, the skin suit's current occupant had literally never met him before. Under less hostile circumstances, I would have tried to explain that my gaps were not chosen. I happen to remember a Thanos snap of memories from certain times in my life. I only know certain people existed in those gaps because I have a sense of object permanence that suggests they came to me from somewhere. And all I could do was shake my head slowly, maintain eye contact, and watch for sudden movements. Aware that others were tuning into our intimate reunion, the man worked to pack all of his anger back into himself. It was hard, but he managed to put the toxic paste back in the tube and sat back. It gave me a better look at the old suit that fit him better 10 extra pounds ago, the new tie that someone gave him, maybe for whatever brought him to town. His face fell into an expression of disappointment, like this was a moment he dreamed of, and it was wasted because of a dozen witnesses. Then, he shot up out of the chair and left the restaurant. He didn't even order, I guess. I sat there, lost for what I had been doing in the first place, and took my time to stop the trembling in my hand and the sparks in my head, and made my way out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat still frightened, not about what had just happened, but what I might have done to earn such seething hate from a stranger. A shadow crossed the driver's side window, and I looked up with a start. It was him. He stabbed a finger into the glass. That gesture felt familiar. He yelled, "Don't you ever show your face back home, fucker. I'll smack that fat right off your face, you hear me?" He pounded on the side of his hand against the glass, but it simply trembled about as much as I did, and he was gone. Surely, something so heinous would be in a police record, right? At least a tale told by police from around that time and place. I had no inkling of such a thing and no cool story to put a face to. Doubtful, I began to resent the fact that I didn't have the presence of mind to ask a single goddamn question before he bolted. That fuel made my damaged brain fire harder through the mess of memories and imaginings, the based on a true story section of my head that tries to make sense of what I no longer witnessed. Greg. That name jumped out at me, complete with the extra G, making it seem more real. The face was just a flicker, and my need to get more forced me to not think too hard about it. Part of my coping mechanism is to assign values where none exist, making connections for the protection of my sanity, but at the cost of real memories. I have to distract myself from painting and memories and let the subconscious part of my mind work out the facts as best it can. So I went back to work and made an appointment to meet my sister that weekend, put flowers on graves and find my old yearbooks. I wanted to go on social media and ask my friends from that time about that guy, maybe creep on their friends' pages, looking for a grinning skull for a profile pic. That's a danger too, as every new face that registers risks becoming a fictional version of itself. Something about boots? Snow? These useless reports emerged early, but I was able to revisit them knowing the boots were important to me and that the snow was cold and hard. There was physical pain associated with these memories too. I also started running my tongue over a chipped tooth for the first time since I could remember. I drank hard that night because while I'm not supposed to, it kills my dreams. That weekend, I met my sister who didn't recognize my description of a man 30 years beyond any memory she could have had of him. I asked her if I ever did anything so horrible that made a man want to kill me over it. She replied that I made her feel that way a lot. Then she asked me to borrow $50. I was much luckier over golf with a friend of mine who understands my situation and represents a good friend that I lost. He is the custodian of many of my memories and helped me recover those first few years. We grew apart because he says that I developed a different personality and I was all about things in order and following instructions. "You went square," he said, not registering the irony of calling it that. "Do you know someone named Greg from our past who I really pissed off?" I described him and explained a conversation we shared. Philip was doubtful, but it took a while to consider it. As he did, I added my random evidence. A favorite pair of boots, winter time and the snow, being thrown into it and chipping a tooth maybe. Philip looked at me, and I could tell he knew. It was before I met Philip, but he had heard about it. I was 15 and I got into a fight with some kid named Greg who just came into school from somewhere. He was, as Philip put it, a dick. Within a month, he had been expelled. Part of the reason for that was that he beat the living shit out of me. It wasn't important to Philip, so my old story about getting beat up on the walk home through heavy snow wasn't a big memory of him, but he remembered the part about the boots. It was winter. Greg had an old sneakers and a long walk home. He walked with an older kid, a dropout called Clyde, who everyone in the neighborhood hated. Clyde and Greg were pretty much kindred spirits in their life-hating rebellion and love of violence. When Philip told me Greg beat me up for my boots and maybe left me to walk home in wet, cold socks, it did not jog a memory, but it made sense. We continued playing golf and I lost 6 balls before I gave up on the fairway of the 15th. Soon after getting back to my motel, Greg Kowinski had a name and a face. Google filled me in on the rest. I wouldn't know about the boot story until much later, but Greg Kowinski was a convicted felon. He was also on the sex offender registry. I was, if not the first domino to fall in his life, I was the only one that ensured that they would begin falling steadily forward, steadily onward. Soon after he was expelled from school, Greg met up with other troubled kids, including Clyde, and began selling drugs. Soon, he was trafficking and working in a warehouse that packaged and delivered large quantities. Along the way, he pursued his favorite pastime of meeting, using, and abusing young women. He went to jail for beating a woman at the bar. He dated another woman and went to prison for a sex act with her underage daughter. With the doors closing behind him, Greg created an enemy list of all people who wronged him. I know this because it was used in evidence to put him in prison again for stalking an ex-girlfriend. How he was back on the streets and his purpose in Transdelphia remains a mystery, but I'm pretty sure and am on his list. One of his many victims who walked home half a mile through snow in thermal socks and whose parents had Greg arrested for it. He knows where I live. I know this because he sent me a message on Facebook that was sequestered because he isn't a friend of mine or connected to me elsewhere. He coded my address and added, "See you sometime." That was over a year ago. I've locked down my social media since then, especially after he started liking pictures of my wife and sister. I hate going home again now, and I hate going to the old haunts, even once in public, because I don't want to see his face. I'm at a point now where the gap in knowledge has narrowed to the point that seeing him again may fill in all the details of that beatdown. Somehow, I think remembering it frightens me more than the risk of anything he would try to do to me. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I would also like to thank my following patrons: Fire05, Gabriel, Moschino, Ralph, Lori, and Jake. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. If you want to support the channel further, you can be a patron too. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.